I'd like to start with auctioning the small one, which is Tippy Walkin', as we all know now. Does everybody remember that that's here? Pretty much everybody should, I think. In this building? Oh, we've got the former caretaker here. I'm gonna have to talk to you about that a little bit. 31 to 34. He'll certainly give you more details on it though, if you'd like. So this is an original watercolor of Tippy Walkin', and this is something that everybody should have. Now I don't know do you have prints available?
I have a few prints available.
There's a few prints available. They're a limited edition, of course, but this is the original. So I'd like to have a starting bid of $100. Who's going to bid $100 for me? Got $100 right here. Now that's a heck of a buy for an original piece of art, and it's part of our history. It's why we're all here. So I'd sure like to see another bid here. Who would bid $150, please? $150? Watch your hand, Charlie. It was almost a bid. Somebody must have $150 for a piece of art to hang on your wall. That's part of our history of Island Park and the Mound area. Anybody? Now this is a rendition of the Maple Heights Inn, which is actually the same building. It had a different boathouse and a little bit different stuff down by the lake, but the building is actually the same. So you can, if you want to, you could call this Tippy Walkin'. You can do it either way. Is that okay, Mary? Yeah, there we go. Mary, the artist said it's okay. So this is a bigger print. I hope everybody had a chance. I shouldn't say print, it's an original. I keep saying that. The wonderful watercolors. I'd like a starting bid on this. Anybody?
Debbie Thurlson Heights, please.
I'm putting that bag up there to tempt you guys because I think that most of you that grew up on the island probably remember getting one of these little brown bags. Especially those bold kids. I just wanted to give you a little brief history. For the last 6 months, I've been working on the history of the Island Park Fire Department. It's very interesting. Those guys came close. Is this close enough? Hello. Is that good? Okay. The Island Park Fire Department was organized by a group of men in November 1st of 1933. The purpose of that was to have a quicker response time than what Mound had been giving them. At the time, they had a huge fire that it took Mound 30 minutes to get to Island Park. We're assuming it was because of the roads. Their first public meeting was held at Pembroke Community House, inviting all eligible male citizens with a desire to join the association. Mr. George Kavanaugh acted as the chairman. They had 21 citizens present. They signed themselves as charter members, and if any of you have time in the memorabilia room, we do have the original charter out there. So if you have time, take a look at it. It's kind of interesting. The aim and the purpose of that organization was to create, through public spirit with loss of the village of Island Park, a fund to purchase a fire truck and firefighting equipment. The purpose to fight fires, protect public life, and create a neighborly social spirit. And anyone that grew up on the island knew that the firemen did have a lot of social spirit. It was a busy year for these guys. They organized card parties, dances, and a few days before Christmas, they held their first public Christmas party, which all the children in the entire village were invited to. And if any of you remember that, or don't remember, we do have a video in the video room from 1960 from the Christmas party. Every child attending did receive a nice gift from the firemen, and Santa would come and hand these out to us. This is probably one of the beautiful, valuable gifts that we did receive. You could pass it around if you want to share that. And then as we were leaving, every child got a brown bag. And in this brown bag, we always were assured of fruit, salted in the shell peanuts, and hard candy. Now, you know, hard candy, they never thought about choking in those days, so If anyone would like to have this wonderful brown bag, they're more than welcome to it. Skip, do you want to auction it? Sure, it'd bring in at least $2-3. So, anyway, getting back to where we were going here, they also had a junior fire department that was organized to promote firefighting, life-saving, and teach first aid to the young children. These guys purchased their first fire bell from Long Lake Fire for the sum of $25, and it was installed on the hill. As we all know, the hill, because we all took a slide or a toboggan and went for a ride down it, at least once. The well-needed equipment was being purchased and as funding allowed. Some of the first equipment purchased was a soda and acid tank from the Washburn Crosby Company at a very reasonable price. In 1934, they purchased their first truck, which held two 40-gallon chemical tanks and some other items from the city of Zumbrota for a total sum of $300. This was made possible with a loan from the Mound Bank. Then they purchased 8 more soda and acid tanks for the sum of $14, and those guys thought that they were in business. On March 16, 1934, the men held their regular meetings at the home of George Bailey to discuss a fire alarm system. And we talked about going to, was it Bulls or Iversons, and pushing the button. They did do that. But in 1934, some of them did actually have telephones. Those that didn't, they had to wait for that siren to go off. So the general ring of 6 long signals would ring, and that meant that the guys had to report to the fire, and to pick up a party line phone and listen to where it was and report there. One person was appointed to ring the fire bell for those who are not having the phones. The siren on the fire truck was also used as the alarm system until more adequate signals were in place. In April of 1934, they decided to hold regular monthly meetings and use the community houses within the village. Devon and Pembroke were the most prominent. In July, they were on a mission to get the bank paid off and work together to protect the island. They started a door-to-door donation drive. And by August, they had $322. And that was after they paid all their approved bills. They now needed a place to house their fire apparatus. They were looking at lots 1, 2, and 3, block 20 of Witchwood, across the street from Bowles, and where our Island Park Village Hall sits today. They purchased that in 1934 for the amount of $75. By November 1934, the Island Park Fire Department was underway working with building plans from the Federal Work Project. This building was completed and it was used. They had held an open house, and at the end of December of that year, they had $859 in assets. So those guys really worked hard if you think about traveling around the island door to door asking for money to build a fire station, getting WPA in there, and then have money in their pocket that they spent on all of us kids getting these beautiful bags. In 1940, Al Bull was elected chief and remained chief for the fire department for 21 years. In 1941, they had the Fire Association voted to start paying their firefighters. The chief was paid 70 cents an hour, the association members 65 cents, and the firefighters 60 cents an hour. They were also paid at that time for 4 drills a year. I think things are a little different today, don't you, Donnie? So, over the years, many residents became volunteers, and I don't have a list of them all. I'd like to. I'm working on trying to get everything updated. But over the years, many residents became volunteers, and they stayed with the department until the merger with Mound in January 1963. Previous past members were Herman Johnson, William Ringer, Charles Ford, Ralph Edwards, John Iverson, Al Bull, Jim Devine, Glenn Rogers, Al Swanson, Ken Stork, Cliff Sherman, Ray Tharlson, Al Quist, Jack Wilson, Jerry Thompson, John Rosh, Bud Kelly, Gordy Swenson, Roger Lateral, Max Fayville, Bob Cheney, Leaf Sands, Bruce Jarvie, Joe Corman, Jess Drager, Dick Ritchie, Herman Quist, Al Ovison, Larry Quist, Dan Kissinger, Adolph Hildebrandt, Lee Erickson, Mr. Went, and I don't know why we don't have a first name for that guy. Mr., evidently, he went somewhere. Carl Anderson, Ted Pilgrim, Lee, and this is a good one, I can't pronounce this one, Felsticker. Mr. Keel, Al Magnuson, Orv Neal, Vern Spangrud, Einar Swenson, and Bob Kohler. So it's kind of interesting to see because we probably all are related in some way or know an Island Park fireman. Then one of the events that they held that was one of their special days was their first annual field days, was held on Sunday, September 1st, 1935. That event actually took place in Swenson Park. And they started out the whole program at 11:30 in the morning by having a kiddie parade. Anyone that wanted to be in this parade could be in the parade, and they paraded around the park, and around the park, and around the park. They had it really kind of neat the first year. I was reading in the old minutes and stuff, and somebody had donated a washer, old wash tubs for them to do dishes in. Somebody donated a stove, strings of lights, an ice box. You know, so it was kind of neat how they started all that. So they decided that this is going to be such a successful event that they better, you know, have a ball game or two. So the first ball game was between the Douglas Tigers, which happened to be managed by Doc Taylor, and the Island Park Firemen. Bands from Wayzata and Excelsior furnished the music. And they had the event, and it started in the morning, and it went until 11:30 at night, and then I'm sure they went and had canoopers somewhere else. In the evening, 2 grand prizes were awarded. The first year, they gave away a 26-piece of silverware, and at 11:30, they had a drawing for a diamond ring. And the diamond ring drawing ticket happens to be out on one of the boards. The event was such a success that they moved to have a 2-day event the following year, and they added bingo and some other games for the kids to play. They did penny pitch. I've lost my other page of notes here, but they had a pond. I was only 6. I don't really remember a lot. What other games did you guys play for those kids, Mom? Watermelon eating contests. Given out over the years were radios, portable and plug-in, outboard motor, a table and chairs, a mix master, complete with a juicer, a toaster, and other household needs. So it's kind of interesting how much work that they did do for our community. And thank you guys for coming here today. And I want to thank Pam Myers for all the work that she has done and kept us under her bell. And she's done a very good job. And Donna and Doug, you guys are great. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Try again now with Tom and a letter to read. Tom Rockvam.
I'm Tom Rockvam, and Doug called me this morning and said, "Would you do me a favor?" He said, I've got a letter from Billy Gunnell that we want to get read. And I thought, you know, as much as Doug has done and Donna's done, I think the least I could do is read the letter. And about that time, I had a crown fall off my tooth. So I'm not as beautiful as I usually am. Anyway, I vaguely remember myself Billy Gunnell, but he was, you know, he was a big kid in the neighborhood, along with Richie Lindstrom and Spike Larson and Wayne Dahlge. Maybe those names mean something. And I was like 5 years old. And the only real memory I have from those guys, they took inner tubes and cut pieces out of them. They made these rubber guns, they called them. They had to be this long, and they had stretched those binders across, and somehow they had a clothespin that would release that thing. And man, I'll tell you what, you come home, they had welts all over you. But we'll forgive him anyway. But anyway, I'm going to read the letter he sent. He couldn't be here. And he said, the flyer for the Island Park celebration is going to take place on June 23rd was sitting on my desk. And I thought I had read it before. Although I had read it before, I picked it up and started reading it again. I shouldn't have done that. It brings back a flood of memories that just won't stop. Memories are hard to shut off. As I look at the map on the cover, I can't help thinking about all the things we did as kids on all those places on the map. Opening the flyer to the inside page was even worse. Get ready to walk down memory lane. It says there something I can't stop thinking about. It talks about 5-cent cones, ice cream cones at Grimm's store. Heck, that was a popular store, he said, long before Gilbert Grimm bought it. He said, you remember Tuxedo Grocery because that wasn't very far from your place. He's talking to Donna here. It wasn't very, yeah. Donnie Sherman's dad, Al, had the store at Pembroke, and I can still remember old lady Hildebrand perched on that stool behind the counter at Chester Park Grocery. He said, we always called her old lady Hildebrand, but in truth, she probably wasn't any older than we are now. When we had company and wanted to treat everyone, we'd go down to Hildebrand's and get her to hand pack some ice cream. That's the only way you could get it in those days. He said we had to eat it right away because it wouldn't last long in an ice box. No refrigerators back then. He said, you see how this memory thing works? I mentioned icebox and I start thinking about all the guys going out on Cook's Bay in the winter to cut ice, to haul to the ice house by the town hall so that old man Iverson could deliver it to all the houses in the summertime. Remember the window ice cards so he would know how much ice to bring to the house? He kept a little slip on the wall at each house so he would know how much ice he had delivered. And when people paid their ice bill, he would cross off enough of the ice delivered to take care of the payment. It was a simple bookkeeping, and of course these were trusting times. Remember taking the new kids out to Enchanted Island to teach them how to snipe hunt? It's hard to think about Enchanted Island without thinking about all the time we spent diving off the bridge or laying on our backs on the bridge at night looking at stars and clouds by moonlight and saying, look at that one, it looks like a horse. I remember Bobby Bowl was one of the kids who went out there with us. You remember Bobby. He died in an accident the year after he got out of high school. He's buried in cemetery just north of Mound, and one night Spike Larson, Richie Lindstrom, both now gone, and I went out to his grave to have a beer with Bobby. As we sat around his grave, we'd take a few sips and pour a little beer on his headstone, just to remind him that he was still with us. Thinking about Bobby Bowl brings back more memories. Growing up from little toddlers, I remember Donnie and Bobby and Marlis Bowl because they only lived a couple of doors from me. We used to swing on the vines from trees in the woods and pretend we were Tarzan and Jane. And as kids, we built tree houses, forts, we went skinny dipping, we tipped over lots of outhouses on Halloween, and we were always ready to ride on the running board of Dad's car. Many times we would leave the house in the morning and not come home until we heard the 6 o'clock siren. That's not the case today, he says. There were all kinds of communities on Island Park like Devon and Arden, and how many people remember the gas station at Chester Park or the one at Grimm's Corner? Many people on Island Park today probably never heard the names Bryce, McWalters, Pilgrim, Dolge. Boy, I could go on for a long time with this. If you and I sat down and gave it some thought, I'll bet we could come up with the whole IP phone book of years gone by. I came upon the enclosed, I did have a picture in here, enclosed picture taken during the war. The Boy Scout on the left is Donnie Bowl, and I'm the little kid on the other side. Get a load of the knickers I'm wearing. They were popular pants back then. He said, the flag on the right is between Bobby Bowl with the old man's hat on and Eddie Knutson. The guy with the mustache on the far right is Don Sprague. He gave the prayer that day, and he was looking for people to come to the new church he was starting up at the Island Park Town Hall. A number of years ago, when Rich Lindstrom passed away, I got to thinking about all the good times we had as kids growing up on the island, and I wanted to keep those times alive. That's why I started up the Island Park Guys Club. That turned into the Island Park Guys and Gals Club and finally became the Romeo Lunch Bunch to include all us old Mohawks. That group sure has grown. Last year we had 80 people at the luncheon, and we hope to have a good turnout on July 26th when we hold it this year. You see how easy it is to get carried away with memories? The main reason I started writing this letter was to thank you and the rest of the folks for the work you are doing to help make the Island Park celebration a success. I would much prefer to thank you all in person, but that is impossible due to previous commitments. However, rest assured, I'll be right there on the island forever in my memories. Good memories never go away. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. How about Vern Spangrud?
Hi there, my name is Vern Spangrud. I grew up on the island. My folks moved there in 1944, and I was there until 1960, I guess, when I left home. But there are a few things here that everybody's touched on, a lot of things, and there are a few things that were missed that I thought should be brought up.
Stand a little closer to the mic.
Thank you. A few things that weren't brought up that I thought we should touch base on was, one, how many of you here went to the school on Island Park? Not many people know that because Shirley Hills was being built and they didn't have room for other kids, you know, for the Island Park kids. So they took, and the Island Park Community Church served as a school for, I believe it was second and third graders. Well, where I lived was just on top of the hill from the old ballpark. And so I go school every day, I grab a chunk of cardboard, I go to Killer Hill, I was there, you know? And then at recess time, we'd go out there and slide, and it was nothing but a sheer tube of ice from the top of the hill all the way down. You could go on a toboggan from the top of my mom's house, excuse me, she still lives there, by the way. You could go all the way down and cross the park and end up in front of Isabel Bryce's place. So it was a lot of fun for us kids. Another thing that I remember that a lot of people might not remember was where my mom lives, straight up the hill from the old ballpark, there was another little hill that went a little bit higher that overlooked Cook's Bay. And on the 4th of July, they'd have fireworks coming out of the old casino, which, if some of you remember, they had roller skating and bowling and a lot of pinball machines and a lot of things for kids. And we'd sit up on the hill and watch the fireworks during the course of the year. Another thing that I noticed too, that there's a lot of people here that aren't from the island, and we welcome you. You are now part of us. So you can't deny the fact now that you know somebody from Island Park. I didn't get an Island Rat button and I felt bad. I just got a regular one. Thank you. Thank you. Another thing that I wanted to mention was somebody had mentioned about the rivalry between the different communities in Island Park. Island Park had their own baseball team, a bunch of kids. I played on it for a couple of years and had a really good time. Coach Green was the coach at that time. I don't remember his first name, but it was a lot of the kids. We played ball there. And another thing with the rivalry aspect, how many of you people remember the time that the Dunk the Clunk disappeared from Spring Park? Huh? Is that all I remember? Come on, you guys. I know some guys. That's better. That's better. Now, the statute of limitations is out on that. So we're safe. Because I know 5 of the guys that were involved in this that are in the room right now. I don't want to mention any names because they're still bigger than me. They were when I was little, and that hasn't changed, so I respect my elders. But other than that, the island was a great place to grow up. You swam before you were 5. You skated before you were 5. Excuse me. We confess. Until I mentioned the statute of limitations, they weren't going to say a word, you know. But there are 4 of them over there, and I think I rode along. And I think Dick Fenton's car was involved in this, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a good time. One thing that sticks in my memory was the day that behind the village hall there used to be a tower, and on the tower was a bell. And when fires come out, the bell got rung, and word of mouth to where the fire was and that. But I was about 4 years old, and I'd ask my dad, I says, why is the bell ringing all the time? And he told me, he says, well, because it's the end of the war, end of World War II, and somebody from the fire department probably took shifts, and they rang that bell all night long. So that's how, you know, it was really a close-knit community. And when I left the island, you guys turned on me and went and joined Mound. Thank you very much.
Terrific, thank you. And Nancy Perry. Stand right up to the mic.
Hi, I was Nancy Obeson, and my mother her parents were the third settler on the island. The Iversons were number one. I remember them telling me, and I know the Bowles and Iversons and just about everybody here, the Quists, and when my parents got married, they graduated from Mound High School when they got married in 1932. In the maybe 34, 36, my grandmother gave them the property. But my mother and dad worked at Shoning's grocery store, and I know Gay is here, who was a granddaughter, Marge and Tom Brandvold. And my mother made $11 a week, and my dad made $12 a week. My dad delivered the groceries, and my mother clerked. And she said it was really hard times back then because it was right after the Depression, and Mr. Shoning was always so generous. He never turned anybody away. He'd say, can't you pay a little bit? And most of the time they couldn't. So I also wanted to say about the fire hall. One thing that we mentioned, I remember the Christmas parties and field days, was that we also had Halloween parties over there too that the firemen put on for the kids, and we'd go in costumes. And I remember my sister and I were always scared to death to go home because my dad was such a prankster that most of the kids didn't want to come to our house because he would scare them. One time we came home and he had rigged up a pulley from our house to the house next door and had a sheet over it, and as we came up it would go woo, and the sheet would fly through the dark and you would be just petrified. There's Julie Kissinger and I grew up, our parents, Don Kissinger, Esther Iverson, and my parents, Al Oveson and Dory Wheelock, were friends from high school on and until their deaths. I mean, they were just very close. Our families were always close-knit. Julie lived in Chester Park, and I lived somewhere between Avalon and Witchwood. I never knew which way I was. And we would ride our bikes and we would meet down at Grimm's, and one time I remember we decided to splurge, and we had a whole quarter and we got 5 scoops of ice cream each on our cones. So it was a great place to grow up, but I just wanted to add that. And we always, the siren at 6 o'clock, if we weren't home by then, we knew we better scoot because otherwise we'd be in trouble. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in.
Now, last but not least, of course, Mr. Ulrich. Thank you. Thank you.
And your bell isn't going to work because I can't hear.
It's okay, I've got a hook.
Okay. But I'm not to hook. It's my pleasure to be
Right
with
up
you.
to the mic.
I will, yes.
Okay.
In the good old days, I wouldn't need the mic. Okay, uh-oh, here comes trouble.
I told her to be there with you to protect you.
You know, we've been married for 102 years. I was 7 when we were married.
Pam said I had to do it.
Oh, what are you going to do? Okay.
Hit you in the rib if you get too long.
Which rib? Oh, that's the one that's sore.
You better tell the truth.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but
Right.
the truth. You know,
Patty and I are not the Andrews sisters. We're the Kohlberg sisters.
you got to get to the mic here.
Oh,
You're going to take over. Go ahead. Nothing new.
I'm not going to take over, but Patty and I are not the Andrews sisters. We are the Kohlberg sisters, and we are Island Parkers. This guy just happened to show up from 3 points. Oh.
Now wait, Norm Scarrett and I rescued these babies. Because you heard the stories about what these guys did in the island. Well, we just couldn't imagine these girls being subject to that kind of treatment. So we rescued them. Now, Norm is from the Spring Park, one of the other fine municipalities. Are you done now? You give up? Well, you know, it's always first of all, I want to say welcome to the dignitaries, because you bring with you such a wealth of memories for me. You know, listen. Okay, I think I've had all the help now I can stand. It's great to be here, and it's great to see the dignitaries with all of their history and the stories tonight. How in the world can I follow all of that? In addition to that, there's a bit of a risk being called on to speak last in the evening and after everyone has had dinner. Now, normally there's 3 problems you run into. A, they're asleep. B, they're at the bar. C, they're in the car. So it's, you know, you've complimented me by being here, and I don't want to ignore the people on this side, because I think some of them didn't live on the island, and that's their blessing. So now my topic was the Kullberg family. Now, I'm an Ulrich from the 3 Points, but I agreed on Memorial Day under a maple tree at the Mound Cemetery to say a few words. So here I am. Bear with me. It ain't gonna be good, but it's here. The Kullberg family moved to the island in about 1940. Had a little trouble remembering these Andrews sisters, but it was about 1940, and actually that family has been around to the present day. There's members of that family, and there were a lot of them. And boy, do I know them. And boy, do they know me. So, on with the story. After spending a summer at the lake for several years, they moved out to the lake in 1940, and so for the next 65 years, they were part of the community. Now, they were Axel Kullberg, Pat Kullberg were brothers, and their brother Andrew Kullberg, who was truly an uncle, always went by the name Uncle Andy. They came from Sweden. And so that was part of the close-knit family. You to see what else I wrote down here 3 days ago. And Axel and Pat, I've already covered that. Pat and Evelyn brought 5 kids to the island, brought and had during that period of time. Ray Tharlson was one of them, with Mona and Bonnie, and their daughter Debbie is also here today. Ronnie Kullberg, Ronnie's Cleaners in Navarre, had his kids. Elaine and Bob Rude, and he was a part of Axel and Bob's Meats, and they are 4 kids. Verna Kullberg, that's my wife, and her 7 kids. She had a lot of kids. And Patty Scarrett and her 5 kids. So we had 20 grandchildren that all attended the Mound schools, all lived here and attended the Mound schools. Now there's another branch of this clan called the Quists. You've heard from some of them, but you haven't heard about them. But you've heard enough really articulate people tonight that I'm not going to bother with many stories. How it came that Pat Kullberg was in the food business occurred in 1940 when Pete Jackson, who owned the restaurant in Jackson Corners, now known as Avar, and it was the Jackson Station and the restaurant. And he asked Pat Kullberg to come and cook there. And Pat had a long history of having been a cook. And Pat did that. And from I'm stumbling here, but bear with me. From the Jackson's Cafe, he went to his own Dello Cafe, where the Dello Terra Hotel property was. And if those of you who remember, the Dello Terra Hotel was a magnificent hotel, and the beautiful grounds going to the lake, and then there were some cottages or houses that people could rent that were a part of the hotel thing. Well, on that property is where they had the Dello Cafe. And the Dello Cafe was probably one of the early places where the boaters, the big boats, the moneyed people came with their big boats to land in those docks. I remember Pat put docks in using telephone poles, and they were really solid docks. By the second year, the ice had pushed those heavy docks over. He went back to lighter docks. Those posts stayed in the water there for years and years. Some of his guests were Cedric Adams, Howard Viken, J.R. Clark, Ed Streeter, the Dr. Seifert from Excelsior, and of course many, many others. Pat loved to feed people. That was his vocation in life. So the Kullberg and Quist clan were always a part of this community, very influential. And no, they didn't intermarry, but they certainly were close. So that's about all I have to say. I would take questions, except that I don't hear well, and you've heard enough stories already.
We don't have time.
So thank you for your time.
Good job.
Nicely done. Thank you, Don. I'd like us to do a little recognition for Doug Easthouse. Doug organized our speakers today. Thank you, Doug. And let's recognize Donna. Donna took all the phone calls. Raise your hand if you call Donna on the phone. That would be everybody in the room, right? Indeed. And Debbie, thank you again for the incredible displays. Let's see, could we have committee members? Committee members stand up if you were on the committee. That'd be Sue and Gail and Helen and Skip and whoever else. Jim and Phyllis. Thank you all for your organizing, for your diligence. We met together, of course we ate really well because we ate at Ellen Allen's, but we met really regularly and we did a lot of work. We had fun. Thanks so much for coming.